In the dark years of World War II, when Europe burned and nations trembled, a silent force was born, one that didn't rely on bullets, tanks, or firepower. Instead, it fought the Axis with illusions. This was the Ghost Army, an extraordinary group of artists, sound engineers, and tricksters whose mission was to fool Hitler's armies through the art of deception. The idea for such a unit came from an urgent need. By 1943, Allied forces were stretched thin across Europe. Every move had to be calculated, every operation concealed. The German army had become masters of reconnaissance, reading the land and predicting troop movements with chilling accuracy. The Allies needed a counter-weapon not of steel, but of imagination. Deep inside the U.S. War Department, a few visionary officers proposed something unheard of: a deception unit that could create the illusion of an entire division, complete with fake tanks, ghostly convoys, and the roar of non-existent artillery. Their mission: to mislead the enemy, to make them believe what was never there. And so, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops were born. This was not your typical fighting force. Its soldiers were painters, designers, sound experts, and theater professionals. Many came from art schools in New York and Philadelphia. Some had worked in advertising. Others had once painted movie sets. Now, their creativity would be weaponized. The birth of the Ghost Army was kept secret even from other Allied units. Their base of operations was hidden, their assignments classified. They trained under the cover of ordinary drills. But instead of rifles, they carried sketchbooks. Instead of grenades, they hauled amplifiers and canvas. What they were building wasn't destruction, it was illusion. As they prepared for their first mission, the men knew the stakes. If captured, they could be executed as spies. There would be no recognition, no medals, no public praise, only shadows and silence. But still, they volunteered. They believed that deception could save lives, that if the enemy attacked the wrong place, thousands of real soldiers might live another day. Their commanders divided the unit into specialized teams: the Visual Deception Group, armed with inflatable rubber tanks, fake artillery, and dummy camps; the Sonic Deception Group, which used massive speakers to project recorded battle sounds across miles; the Radio Deception Group, experts in mimicking Allied radio traffic to convince the Germans of false troop movements. Together, they would create an illusion so convincing that even experienced enemy scouts would believe they were facing a massive force. By early 1944, the Ghost Army was ready. Before D-Day, they were sent to England for final training. Their tasks were rehearsed like a theatrical production: timing, sound, positioning, lighting. Every detail mattered. They even practiced how soldiers would walk through camp, how vehicles would move, how smoke would rise from fake kitchens. The year was 1944. Europe was still trembling under the weight of war. Allied forces had landed in Normandy, but victory was far from certain. The Germans were desperate, brutal, and watching every movement from the skies. It was during this chaos that the Ghost Army received its first mission, codenamed Operation Elephant. The assignment was clear: to deceive German intelligence into believing that a large Allied armored division was gathering near the French village of Laval. The real division, meanwhile, was secretly moving elsewhere to prepare for a major offensive. If the deception worked, the enemy would deploy their forces to the wrong location, buying the Allies precious time and saving countless lives. Under cover of darkness, trucks carrying strange cargo rolled quietly into the French countryside. The villagers who peeked through their windows couldn't believe what they saw: soldiers inflating what looked like giant rubber bladders. But these weren't toys, they were inflatable tanks, designed to look exactly like the powerful Sherman and Pershing machines used by the U.S. Army. By dawn, a full armored division appeared to have materialized out of nowhere. Rows of tanks stood in the mist, perfectly arranged in formation. Radio antennas extended into the sky. Camouflage nets fluttered in the morning breeze to any enemy aircraft flying overhead. It looked like the Allies were preparing for a massive assault. But there was one secret: none of it was real. A few hundred yards away, the Sonic Deception Group got to work. Massive speakers were set up behind trees and buildings, connected to record players containing the sounds of roaring engines, hammering tank crews, and soldiers shouting commands. These sound effects had been recorded earlier at a real training base in the U.S., and now they echoed through the French hills with terrifying realism. For the first time in history, sound became a weapon. When German reconnaissance planes flew over Laval that week, they saw exactly what the Ghost Army wanted them to see: thousands of troops, hundreds of tanks, and supply lines that didn't exist. The illusion was perfect. German intelligence quickly intercepted the fake radio traffic being transmitted by the signal unit, which mimicked the communication style of the real division down to the smallest detail. Within hours, the German high command took the bait. Enemy troops were ordered to reposition to face the threat. sending entire battalions marching miles away from the actual Allied advance. The Ghost Army had done it. Their illusion had shifted the tide of battle, without firing a single bullet. But their success came at a price. The men of the 23rd Headquarters couldn't take credit for their victories. They couldn't tell anyone who they really were or what they had done. When they returned to base, they blended back into the shadows. Their story remained a whisper among the few who knew the truth. By late summer 1944, the Allied push across France was gaining momentum. But victory still came at a terrible cost. The port city of Brest, a key German stronghold on the western coast, had become a fortress. Thousands of enemy troops, hidden in bunkers and tunnels, were determined to hold their ground at any cost. For the Ghost Army, this mission was unlike anything before. Operation Brest wasn't just about tricking the enemy from a distance. This time, they had to deceive the Germans right at the front lines, while real bullets flew over their heads. As dawn broke over the countryside near Brest, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops arrived under heavy secrecy. Their task, to convince German intelligence that a massive, armored division was preparing to attack from the south, drawing enemy fire away from the real Allied assault approaching from the east. It was the boldest illusion yet. Working under constant threat, the visual deception unit got to work immediately. They began inflating tanks, trucks, and artillery pieces in open fields, moving them throughout the day to mimic real troop movements. Every few hours, they shifted positions, leaving tire marks in the mud, fake footprints, and even empty ration boxes, all to make the illusion come alive. Nearby, the sonic unit rolled out their secret weapon, enormous loudspeakers, capable of blasting sound miles across the battlefield. They played recordings of tank engines, troop convoys, and the thunder of artillery. German scouts reported heavy mechanized movement in the southern sector, exactly as planned. But there was one problem. Unlike their previous operations, Brest wasn't quiet countryside. It was an active combat zone. German artillery units began to respond to what they thought was an approaching army. The shells started landing dangerously close to the Ghost Army's fake encampment. For the first time, illusion met fire. Soldiers who had once been painters, sculptors, and sound engineers now found themselves diving for cover as explosions tore through the air. The inflatable tanks wobbled and collapsed, riddled with shrapnel. Yet the men didn't run. They patched up the rubber vehicles, reinflated them, and moved them to new positions, as if nothing had happened. Every detail mattered. Every risk was worth it. The deception worked better than anyone could have imagined. German commanders, convinced that a full armored division was preparing to strike, redirected artillery and reinforcements to face the southern threat, pulling pressure away from the real Allied advance. The Allies were able to capture Brest sooner than expected, saving countless lives. When the battle was over, they packed up their illusions and disappeared into the fog, leaving behind no trace of their existence. To the world, it looked like a simple victory. No one knew that an army of artists, sound men, and tricksters had helped make it possible. By early 1945, the world stood on the edge of victory, but the fighting was far from over. The Allies had pushed the Germans back across France and Belgium, and now, the final obstacle loomed large, the mighty Rhine River. Crossing it would open the road straight into the heart of Germany and bring the war to its closing chapter. But the Germans knew this too. They were dug in waiting, watching, ready to defend their homeland with everything they had left. That's when the Ghost Army was called for one final, extraordinary mission. Its code name, Operation Viersen. Their objective was breathtaking in scale: to convince German intelligence that the Allies planned to cross the Rhine at a completely different location than the real attack. If successful, it would mislead entire divisions of German soldiers, buying the Allies crucial time to strike where no one expected. This time, the Ghost Army would simulate not just a few battalions but an entire corps of 40,000 men. Under the gray skies of March 1945, the artists, sound engineers, and radio specialists of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops moved silently into position near the town of Viersen. They were just miles away from the real crossing site, working behind enemy lines, cloaked in secrecy. Every detail had to sell the illusion. The visual unit constructed miles of inflatable tanks, trucks, and artillery in carefully arranged formations. They used real camouflage netting, smoke screens, and even nighttime lighting to mimic a living, breathing army. From the air, it looked perfect, a sea of armor preparing to roll toward the Rhine. Meanwhile, the sonic deception unit set up massive loudspeakers, once again, playing endless loops of tank convoys, hammering, shouting, and clanging metal. The sounds echoed across the countryside, convincing German scouts that tens of thousands of troops were moving into place. Then came the radio unit, broadcasting fake messages that matched the chatter of a real headquarters, orders, updates, supply requests, everything to reinforce the illusion. The coordination was so flawless that even Allied pilots flying overhead believed they were looking at a genuine military buildup. Enemy reconnaissance planes reported significant Allied troop concentrations near Viersen within hours. The German High Command shifted its defenses northward, preparing to face the massive invasion that never existed. Meanwhile, just 20 miles south, General Patton's real forces stormed across the Rhine in a surprise assault that met minimal resistance. The Ghost Army had done the impossible once again. Their illusion had altered the course of history, but this time, even they knew something had changed. Standing among rows of deflated tanks, listening to the distant thunder of real artillery, the men of the Ghost Army realized their mission was coming to an end. For 2 years they had fought a war not with guns or bullets, but with art, sound, and imagination. When the guns finally fell silent in May 1945, the world celebrated victory. Cities cheered, soldiers came home, and nations began to rebuild. But for the men of the Ghost Army, silence was all they received. Their mission had been top secret, so secret, in fact, that even their families had no idea what they had truly done during the war. When they returned home, they were told one thing: you can never speak about what you did. And so, for nearly 50 years, the story of one of the most creative and daring units in World War II remained locked away in government archives. The soldiers who had risked their lives to deceive the enemy vanished into ordinary life, becoming artists, designers, teachers, and engineers. Some would go on to shape post-war America in remarkable ways, designing fashion, art, and even products that defined a new era of creativity. But deep inside, they carried the memories, the long nights setting up inflatable tanks in enemy territory, the blaring soundtracks of fake battles, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their illusions had saved real lives. Then, decades later, the truth began to surface. In the 1990s, historians and veterans slowly began to uncover the classified files. Old film reels, radio recordings, and photographs emerged, proof of a story so unbelievable it almost felt like fiction. Documentaries were made, books were written, and the world finally met the phantom soldiers of World War II, artists who fought with creativity instead of guns. One of those soldiers, SGT, Arthur Shillstone, once said in an interview, "We were just kids with paintbrushes and microphones. But for a few moments, the enemy thought we were an army." Their courage didn't just protect the Allies. It reshaped how wars would be fought in the future. From psychological operations to modern military deception, the blueprint they created during World War II still influences global defense strategies today. In 2013, nearly 70 years after their final mission, the U.S. Congress formally recognized the Ghost Army with a Congressional Gold Medal, one of the nation's highest honors. For the surviving members, it was more than a medal. It was validation. After a lifetime of silence, the world finally knew what they had done. Today, the story of the Ghost Army stands as a powerful reminder that war isn't only fought with weapons. Sometimes, it's fought with imagination, courage, and the ability to make the impossible seem real. As the camera pans over those faded, black and white photographs, rows of smiling young men beside inflatable tanks, one can't help but feel a deep sense of respect. They were illusionists in uniform, artists in battle, and heroes in every sense of the word. And though time has taken most of them away, their legacy still marches on, whispering through the winds of history, reminding us that even in the darkest moments of war, creativity can save lives.